in light of some of the stuff we'll be doing tonight, we want to talk some of the principles of self-protection. And one principle I want to talk about tonight, and I want to use a real-life scenario that happened in my family. It actually happened to my wife years ago. Is not making yourself an easy prey or target for a predator, meaning a criminal-type predator, someone who's looking for a victim, someone who's looking for an easy prey of somebody who's doing something. So the principle I want to talk about tonight is not patterning yourself or doing the same thing over and over and over again. So a lot of people, we all become creatures of habit. If you don't pay attention, pretty soon before you know it, you take the same way home every night, you park in the same spot, you go to work, you park in the same spot, you just kind of do the same routine every day. You don't really think of that as, at least I didn't years ago, didn't think of that as a big deal. But what happened was, to make a long story short, we lived in an apartment complex about 20 years ago. Kind of a rough part of town, but not everybody there was bad. It was, just kind of a poor area. But at the time where we worked, my wife would get off work around 5 o'clock, so she was home at 5:30 every day. I didn't get home until 6:30 or so. And she would kind of do the same routine. So she'd come home, take the dog out, go for a walk, cut across the street, make the same path around the field, cut through this little woods that was only maybe a few feet wide, let the dog run around, and then come back around and come back home. That became the normal thing she was doing every single day. So right around the same time every day, right around 5:30, she would come home, walk that same circle. Well, apparently what had happened was somebody must have been driving by or looking or scoping around or just kind of looking around for a victim, and must have seen her one day do that pattern. And then probably a day or two later noticed the same thing, and then noticed the same thing, and started realizing, hey, this chick at around 5:30 walks the same loop every single time. So she's walking the loop one day, and she cuts into the woods, which, like I said, was just a little skinny wooded area. And as she walks by this tree, someone comes out from behind the tree and grabs her from behind, like a bear hug. And most likely it was going to be attempted sexual assault. So she screamed, and the person had a hold of her. She had the dog off the leash, so the dog was about 50 yards away. The dog heard her screaming, came running back, jumped on the guy and started attacking him. She was able to break free and ran out into the field, called the dog out. Of course, called the police. I got home from work. Police had already come. They filed a report. She couldn't identify the person. They never found the person. We suspected that there was this kind of creeper-type guy who worked down the street that we would see at this convenience store. We kind of thought it might be him, but there was no real way to know who it was. It was really just assumptions at that point. The bottom line is this. You don't want to make yourself a victim. A lot of times we do things that we don't even think are making us a victim, but what happens is if someone's actually out there, like the social engineering we talk about, where people are actually out looking for people to prey upon, they're going to look for someone who is parking in the same spot, arriving at the same time, doing the same things, fumbling with their keys, hands full of stuff. Whatever you're doing, when you start doing the same patterns every single day, you're making yourself vulnerable, maybe without even realizing it. So my point on tonight, rather than just another session on punching or kicking or whatever, is one of these principles is, just as you can see this bank behind us, there's people that come up to the ATM, there's cars. If somebody's watching, it's not that difficult to start to look at people and see what they're doing. So my point is that when you go to practice this in your life, when you go home from work or whichever way you come home, start practicing different ways you can come home. Maybe you live in a place where it gets to the point there's only one way in or out, but up to that point, try taking different paths. Try leaving and going a different way. So, like for my house, I try probably about 5 or 6 different ways to get out to the highway and 5 or 6 different ways to get home, because I always try to take a different way out than the way I take in. So if I take route 1, meaning my version 1 way out, I don't take the same one back in. I'll take like my second or third variation to come back in. Or if I take the second or third variation on the way out, I'll take the variation 1 on the way in. So I have about 3 or 4 or 5 different paths I take, and I rotate them and take them differently. That way it's very difficult for people to pattern you. It's very difficult for you to be doing the same thing. You can do the same thing, point that Eric made. You can do the same thing with switching vehicles. You can do the same thing with where you park. Don't park in the same part of the parking lot. Don't park in the same spot. Even if you go and make the same rounds everywhere you go, try to change up your routine. Try not to make it so predictable, because people who are predators, criminal predators, are looking for vulnerabilities and they're looking for certain things. So if they see you doing the same thing, it just makes you more vulnerable. So the point tonight is try to be unpredictable. Start changing up your pattern and practice it in your life. Start taking a different route, start doing different things, and start implementing that into your life. It's a principle of self-protection that we teach, and it's important for you to start practicing it to not make yourself a victim. Cool? All right, be safe out there.